Hello and welcome to the Positive Leadership Podcast, the podcast that helps you grow as an individual, a leader, and eventually as a global citizen. I'm Jean-Philippe. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with a leader who sits at the intersection of science, strategy, and global impact. He's the CEO of AstraZeneca. The company has become a defining force in oncology, cardiovascular disease, respiratory care, while navigating as well the hardest questions of our era: pandemic response, global access to medicine, geopolitical fragmentation, and of course now the AI revolution in drug discovery. He's also someone I know personally, I must disclose. I served on the AstraZeneca board between 2008 and 2016, and I was there, went together with the chairman, Leif Johansson, and the board. We onboarded him as a CEO. In the last months alone, AstraZeneca has been in the headlines for major oncology progress and for accelerating AI-driven discovery, including a recent AI partnership aimed at finding new immunology targets. Pascal Soriot, a very warm welcome to Positive Leadership Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe, and it's a pleasure to be with you, and it's certainly a pleasure to see you again.
Super. Pascal, let's start with the very beginning, which I do with all my guests. You've had quite an unconventional journey. I think you grew up in a suburb north of Paris, and I'm told, at least you shared that story, that you had sometimes to fight to defend your turf, your territory, with your friends. So can you take us back to those early days? What was your upbringing like, your family values, and maybe the gang values as well?
I must say I didn't expect that question, but this story has sometimes been a little bit inflated by the media. But It is true that I grew up in a difficult suburb, but I had a very happy youth, and my parents really were great parents. I had three brothers. They're doctors, so you can see that everybody has done well in the family. But we didn't have much money, actually. In fact, for instance, I always loved horse riding. I love horses. I've always loved the horses since I was 4 or 5, but I could never ride a horse until I could pay for riding lessons on my own. I was 18 or 20. But yeah, we were kind of fighting, not so much to defend our turf, as you said, but more to help each other. And I learned suddenly the value of team spirit. And the real team spirit, not talking about it, but being there for your friends, your mates, as they would say in Australia, when time is difficult. And so I learned that very early on. And I also learned another important lesson, which is never start a fight you think you're going to lose. So it's a kind of judgment of what you're going to go for, where you can win, not win, and also be ambitious in what you want to achieve, of course.
That's a first great nugget that you just share with us. I'm sure we'll discuss that later. What about your parents as well? Maybe you talk about a family with a lot of doctors. So what kind of values, what kind of environment did you grow in, actually?
Well, actually, my father lost his father, so he basically grew up with his mother just post-war, and for some reason, which I don't exactly know, he wanted to study and then join the French Navy, but in the end, because he himself didn't have much money, he had to work. So when he finished his studies, he still studied and was able to finish his studies post-war and then joined the French administration. And he worked for the French Treasury. And I can tell you, sometimes people think employees of the state don't work hard, but I saw my father work so hard. To the extent he one day experienced a heart attack, but he was working incredibly hard. Maybe different times, I can't judge today, but suddenly people working for the state, actually in those days, were working very hard, to the extent that a few times he had people in his team that were missing, and he was enrolling us to do some of the work that his team could not do. And I still remember working for the state myself. I was 13, 14, 15. So, I think, again, our parents taught us the value of hard work. And I think it was general in those days. People who had lived the war I grew up in the northern part of France, of course, and the war was a real event for those people. And they suffered a lot from the war, and they really wanted their kids, their children, to live a much better life. So everybody was working very hard to build a better life and a better life for their kids. So that was my mother stayed home because she took care of 4 boys. That was a full-time job, and I'd argue she did a reasonable job because everybody got a reasonable job. And so, but we had a happy youth. But suddenly, out in the street, it was not always easy every day, for sure.
Thanks for sharing that, Pascal. And I can hear from you loudly this very strong work ethics, which I can see in you for sure in the years we shared at the board of AstraZeneca and still today, I know. But also interesting to hear you about kind of the sense of public service from your dad as well. Because in many ways with medicine as well, it's a service to patients, to people.
Yes. Yeah, one thing that I sometimes tell people, I think growing up in an environment that is not rich, where you struggle a little bit, is not necessarily bad. It can be a godsend. Now, if you live in a very, very poor neighborhood and you cannot study, going to school is difficult, then it's really hard. But if you experience hardship when you're young, I don't know that it's necessarily bad. It certainly was not bad for us because it gives you, the energy or you want to work hard, you want to do better, and essentially when you're in an environment like this, the only way out is school. Yes. That's why school is so critical in any country, especially lower school, because that's really where you actually make a difference and learn the values that you need to have. And so I often think that growing up in a rich family or well-off family is not necessarily a godsend. You can do well there too, of course. Yeah. But, having a little bit of a struggle in life actually can help you.
Fully agree with you. And many guests actually coming also from challenging environments, and you can see the way it shaped them as leaders. So Pascal, you talk about your passion for horses, and eventually I'm sure you've been riding horses. But is it why you became actually, you went into veterinary medicine? So, which is quite a leap before becoming a CEO of a pharma giant, actually. So what did becoming a vet help you in shaping the way today you lead scientists, teams, and patients, first choices?
Yeah, I love horses when I was very young, and I wanted to be a vet when I was 4 or 5 years old. Many kids actually want to be a policeman, woman, or vet, or
or fireman as well.
Fireman. Those are very popular jobs when you're very young, and then often kids lose that as they grow up. I didn't lose that. I finished high school. I was very young. I was 16, and so I went to prep school. University, if you want, for international listeners. So I went to university. I was 16, and I actually was absolutely convinced I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a vet. And in reality, I didn't know. I thought I knew, but I didn't really know. So I became a vet and started working in a horse practice. I did this 3 years, and then my father died. And so I had to, I finished my studies, apologies. My father died, and then I worked for 3 years. I had to work because my brothers were still young, and my mother didn't work at the time. She found a job later on, but at the time it didn't work. Yeah. So I had to work and then help the family. And as soon as my mother found a job, I went back to business school and went back to HEC in France and did an MBA. And then joined the industry. And the reason I did this is, I became more and more interested in the business world, even though I had no clue about the business world.
Yeah.
Nobody to guide me. I was sort of guiding myself. So, I essentially still love horses. I still love animals, but and I'm still a nature lover, I have to say. But I didn't want to spend my life at the same place, so I decided to do something else.
Yeah.
And curiosity is really something that has, I guess, driven me my entire life. So I was curious and went and did this. But I think this education helped me. It helped me in two ways. First of all, science. I mean, you learn
Of
biology,
course.
so I learned biology. And then secondly, I think vets are people who have to be self-sufficient. You really are on your own, and you don't have a lot of support. So you have to be self-sufficient. You have to be flexible. You have to move quickly. So maybe that's also something that the job taught me at the time.
No, wonderful. And clearly, early on as well, you just talk about the move you made into the business world that you didn't know, right? And early on, you left your country, France, to truly build a global life and career. Briefly, for our listeners, you joined Roussel Leclerc in Asia Pacific, and then you took a senior leadership role at Sanofi Aventis in the US, and eventually you became the CEO of Genentech in the US, which is a very exciting role as well. So can you share with us maybe Pascal, 2 or 3 pivotal moments pre-AstraZeneca, again, in those years, that shape your worldview and prepare you to lead at a global scale?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things, before I answer directly your question, I mean, a couple of things I've learned over time is the importance of curiosity and the importance of pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. I actually finished business school, and I joined Roussel Leclerc in Paris originally as a financial controller, which was the first step outside of my comfort zone. I always was good in math and physics, and I love math. I love math and physics. So finance is not that far away. It's all about numbers, of course.
Yeah.
So I was a first step, and then very quickly I was sent to New Zealand to be a rep, and that was clearly a stretch for me because my English was suddenly
Rusty.
difficult. Rusty was beginning, let's say. Because in those days, I learned German. I mean, good students in those days in France, they were learning German as a first language,
Right.
not English. So my English was a bit broken, I have to admit. So that was difficult with my wife and the kids. We had never left France. So going down under so far in New Zealand in those days was not the New Zealand of today. We didn't have nappies, for instance. We didn't have nappies. We had like tissue nappies that you had to clean, as an example. So for my wife and I, it was a bit of a surprise. So it was a challenge. And then I moved to Australia. I was sent to Australia. Then I went to Japan. Then I went to New Jersey for Aventis. At the time, I became head of U.S. commercial and then Sanofi, head of U.S. commercial, and then I joined Genentech in California.
California.
Yes, and I think really the defining moments for me are probably number one, going down to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Because it was a bit of a stretch. I still remember in those days lying in my bed at night, looking at the ceiling and thinking, "What am I doing here?"
With my family, with my terrible French accent, and all those.
That was tough, and in those days they were still doing morning tea and afternoon tea in the office, like in the UK, and then they'd speak English, of course, with their New Zealand accent. I'd go home at night with a terrible headache, trying to understand what they were saying. So that was like a really, what you might call a teaching moment. And so that, and then I often think, operating in a small organization teaches you a lot because I had to do everything.
Yeah.
And so you become a jack of all trade and you learn a lot. So I learned a lot.
You're an entrepreneur.
Yes, you become an entrepreneur. I mean, I was running a small business. I knew exactly how much money I had to make every month to break even because I was not making money, not personally, but the company.
Yeah, for the business,
making money.
Yeah.
So I was counting my dollars every month. So you become an entrepreneur. You know how to run. You know how a biotech entrepreneur or any startup entrepreneur thinks and operates.
Right.
So I learned all of this. The other big defining moment I mean, three defining. Another one
Yes,
was to go to the US because the US was
of
like a
course.
huge learning experience. And, being thrown out in the US organization,
Mm.
managing an organization with maybe 10,000 sales representatives at the time. We
Wow.
had 13,000 people in commercial. And the
Yeah.
only place we could have a national sales meeting was Vegas. There was not enough nowhere else you
To
had
go.
a large room.
Yes.
But probably the most important one was Genentech because
Mm.
I really I learned and I was working there. I mean, I worked with people who are like so smart, and you kind of see what top talented people actually can do. But also the most important is I learned the shared purpose, the value of shared purpose.
Mm.
I mean, everybody at Genentech, the shared purpose at Genentech was so deep and so strong. And
What was it, Pascal?
and I'm sure it's still the case. Well, it was, science and patience. It was really, people understood fully why they were doing what they were doing.
Hmm.
For when you work in the industry and you can think, okay, I'm selling pills or I'm selling
Yeah.
whatever, I'm selling medicines,
Yeah.
and so you look at your market share, your sales, and of course you think of patients, but the connection was so strong and the
Mm.
belief was so strong.
Mm.
People actually would give up some of their budget sometimes in global function, in admin functions or anywhere else to be able
Yeah.
to reinvest in R&D
Hmm.
because everybody was so convinced of the mission that everybody was working on. So I think this shared purpose and the importance of making sure everybody actually is on the same mission is critical. You know, I think it's Kennedy or someone who said JFK. I mean, who said a
Yep.
long time ago, meeting someone who was on the cleaning team at NASA, and
Yes.
said, "What are you doing?" And the person
Janitor.
answered, as a janitor," and the person answered, "I'm sending rockets on the moon." And of course, it's you can see it as an anecdotal, but actually, it really captures completely the spirit that people had at Genentech. And I assume they still have it. I don't know, but it
Yeah.
was very, very strong at the time.
No, wonderful. And it's an excellent segue, actually, Pascal, because many of my guests have kind of a similar passion for purpose. I had on the show Indra Nui, as a former CEO of Pepsi, and she talked about performance with purpose all the time. So when you took over as CEO of AstraZeneca in 2012, remember the company was facing some very big challenges being on the board. How did you craft a purpose-driven vision to transform AstraZeneca again and rally the board and, of course, your leadership team behind you?
Yes, I think since we talk about positive leadership and before answering directly your question, the other thing I learned along the way, which I brought, I integrated in the way I operate is, and I'm not perfect, so I'm not sure that I practice that all the time, but it is to always assume good intent, um, and always assume everybody is actually doing their best.
Hmm.
And that's really key, right? If you want to build a
Yeah.
positive
Yeah.
environment and a team that works together towards a common purpose. But I'm not a believer of a CEO that comes in and fires half of the people and say, "Well, what you guys are doing is really bad, and we're going to change it completely." I'm not a believer in this. AstraZeneca was really going through a tough patch,
Yeah.
as you know, because you were on the
Yeah.
board. That happens to companies.
Hmm.
And my approach was always, because I was influenced, I guess, by the image that I had of Astra when I was in Australia. Had a very positive image of the company. And I had met a number of people along the way over the years. My approach was, even though the company is going through a tough patch, and I'm sure there's quite a number of very good people in this company.
Yeah.
So, first thing we did was to try and focus our strategy on a few limited priorities.
Hmm.
That is, I guess, simple if you want. The difficulty is to do it. because it actually meant that we had to bet, and I'm sure you remember that, being on the board again, but
Yeah.
we had to bet on what we were trying to do, and we had to fund it. We had to put money in it because we were running out of,
Oh, yeah.
profit was crashing very quickly.
Yeah.
When I joined, the company was selling $30 billion, and we were on a rapid decline. And the forecast was we would drop all the way down to 17, 18 billion. And we did drop because we lost several big products to patent expiries.
Yeah.
And I think we were able to stabilize the company down at 19 or 20 billion before we started growing again. But through this journey, we had to sell all products to reinvest that money into R&D. And so, saying you're going to focus and then you have to resource your priorities, textbook business school, easy to say, difficult to do, because
how to do
the way to do it for us was to sell all products, take the profit, put it into R&D, but there was no guarantee of success in the R&D investments. So we lost the profit coming from all products, and if R&D had not delivered, we were finished.
You're done.
And suddenly I was finished also, and the thing was finished. So, we actually decided to set a strategy that was focused on oncology, cardiovascular disease at the time, and respiratory disease, and left it at this. And over time, we built an additional leg, rare disease, through the acquisition of Alexion. But essentially, we've kept focused on this and following the science, betting on good science. And I'm not saying we were successful all the time. We also had a few setbacks. But the important piece was over time to continue building the team. Not sort of fire everybody or half of the team, but really take the team as it was and, good people. And over time, really continue to increase the talent on the table and across the company. I often think about it as a sports team, a football team, a basketball team, whatever kind of a sports team you think of. You continuously have to strengthen your team if you want to go from regional championship to national to international.
And I remember vividly, Pascal, the way you did that step by step, betting on people, also hiring new talents into the company, and working obsessively in a good way on the pipeline, because that's a word I learn a lot in a pharma company, AstraZeneca. What is your pipeline? What's the value of that pipeline? And I think it'd be interesting, and we'll discuss that later, because it'd be interesting for listeners to understand actually the way you assess a pipeline and what it means, and the way you can accelerate the pipeline, de-risk the pipeline, whatever. Because you'll be the master of that. I'd love you to elaborate a little bit more again on the purpose of AstraZeneca, because you share that moment and lesson from Genentech. What about your kind of mark on AstraZeneca purpose and mission? What is it?
Yes, AstraZeneca was, I think, still living the sort of mantra of the pharmaceutical industry of the 2010 period and a little bit after, which was everybody was saying, pharmaceuticals is like consumer goods. It's all about marketing. And of course, even if you have a good drug, you have to make sure physicians understand the value of your medicines and know about it, otherwise they can't use it. But it was excessively, the whole industry, I have to say, was very focused on marketing. And that didn't help the image of the industry for sure, but also I think the industry lost its focus a little bit. And when I was at Roche Genentech, because I was at Genentech originally, and then we merged with Roche, and I became the head of pharma for Roche Genentech. In the late 2009, 10, 11, before I left, because Roche and Genentech were focused on science and pipeline, I was talking about it, and investors were not very convinced. They were saying, well, the age of science, the time of products and pipeline are behind. You really, the industry, I heard this many times, the industry is spending too much in R&D.
Wow.
And when I joined AstraZeneca, I was told this almost at every call not every call, but many calls, because people were saying you put money in R&D, but your R&D is not very good, so you're not going to produce anything. So what we did from the beginning was transition from this sort of marketing era to science and patients. We integrated this in our values. We integrated this in our messaging. And really, it was about we focus on science. We put patients first. We're entrepreneurial, which means we take risks.
Yeah. Yeah.
In our industry, you got to take risks. If you don't take risks, basically you're just going to be plodding along, right? I mean,
laggard.
And maybe even decline. If you take risk and if you fail, then of course you're in trouble. But if you succeed, you can actually do very well as a company. But risk taking is associated with innovation and breakthrough science. So we focused on science. We focused
science
on
first.
the connectivity to patients and patient benefits, and then taking risks. Because one of the things that had happened at AstraZeneca is the company bought in 2008 or so. They bought MedImmune, a biologics company in the US, UK. And they were criticized at the time for overpaying. I think it was actually a good decision, quite frankly. Whether they overpaid or not, I mean, who knows?
It's another debate.
But at least they had the asset. But they were criticized for this. Then 3 phase 3 projects failed, which were going to be big projects. And I'm sure you remember that period too.
Yeah.
And the management told the team, we will not fail in phase 3 anymore. But actually, if you tell the team that, what happens is you never fail in phase 3 because nothing moves into phase 3. So when I arrived, there were a couple of products that were in phase 2, and the team wanted to do more work in phase 2 and more questions because they were so nervous moving it into phase 3. We moved it into phase 3 and it worked. Of course, it could have failed, but it worked because I thought at the time this product has a good chance of success. So the risk taking and then moving to science and moving to, we are here for patients. Time matters. We have to take risks to come up with products that make a difference for patients. And time matters because patients are waiting. I mean, especially in cancer, if you think about it.
Of course.
If you come up with a product that gives patients only 2 years of extra life, people will say, okay, well, you pay a lot of money for 2 years of extra life. Well, first of all, I will argue, if you're the patient, it actually means a lot.
Matters.
You can see your son or daughter graduate from school. You can do all sorts of things. But the other thing is, science in our industry is moving at full speed. Surviving an extra 2 years may give you a chance to get to the next drug that will either cure you or give you an extra 5 years of life. So, and time matters because if your product arrives too late, then some people are going to miss out.
Yeah. No, it's an exciting way actually to summarize. I think I believe a strong philosophy you carry, Pascal. Science first, clearly for the patients, while also for sure developing culture, risk-taking, entrepreneurship. Because if you don't, there's no way you're going to create additional value for the patients first, and then for the company in terms of economics. So I'd like us to discuss this moment because probably, at least for me as a board member, wonderful learning or tough learning as well. This dramatic moment, right, in modern pharma with the attempt of Pfizer to take over AstraZeneca. And the Pfizer bid was not just financial, just for listeners. It was strategic, emotional, political, cultural. I was there, so I know how intense it was. Remember, actually, many hectic board calls we had during Christmas and the year-end in 2013 and the beginning of 2014. So looking back now, Pascal, what did it take between you, your team, Leif Johansson as a chairman of the board, to oppose the offer and hold the line?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in fact, we, at the time, I must say also, Pfizer was very much focused on the financial aspects. And the Pfizer of today is very different from the Pfizer of the time. Pfizer of today is a lot more focused again on innovation. But at the time when they approached us, it was really about financials and tax savings, etc., which, of course, none of those things excites anybody who is committed to making a difference to patients through science, right? But we had already sort of spent a year and a half, roughly a year and a half, right, on our strategy, on our pipeline, on our science, and there were a few early shoots. Is that the right expression? Early shoots?
Attempts,
early signs that
Okay.
we are making progress in the right direction. We had a product in particular. We had a product called Lynparza for ovarian cancer, breast cancer, that we had relaunched because the management before had decided to stop it, and we restarted it, and it became Lynparza, which is a multi-billion-dollar product today, and is helping a lot of patients. But at the time, was in the early phase and moving nicely. And we had a product called Tagrisso in particular for lung cancer. And I was convinced that a merger can work well, by the way. But I was convinced this one would actually totally distract us and disrupt the process of development of Tagrisso, because in those days we didn't have much. So we were 100% focused on the few products we had in the pipeline, and everybody in the company was sort of in charge of Tagrisso, if you want, because it was such a critical product.
Yeah.
And I thought we're going to be distracted. So I didn't think it would create value, and I thought we can do well or better on our own. And our chairman and the board were of the same conviction.
Right.
As you say, it could have failed. We could have all been wrong, right?
Yeah.
But it worked, because in the end, when I joined, the share price was 29 or 30 pounds. When Pfizer approached us, we were approaching 38 or 40 pounds. And they made an offer and increased it. And I think they finished around 55 pounds at the time. And today we are around 140 pounds. So so we hopefully have shown that
the story is told.
It was a stressful experience for everybody, right?
For sure.
I spent, and I'm sure it was the same for you on the board. You remember how many board meetings we had?
I mean, like every day, every night, it was another call. And if you have to kind of take away one big leadership lesson you took at the time, is it like hold the line when you have a deep conviction and just hold the line? I don't know. I don't want to put my words into your mouth, right?
Yes. I tell people, in the end, you've got to listen to everybody who has an opinion to give you, an advice to give you. You listen. I think listening, being open-minded, listening is key, and that's what I do all the time. I listen to many, many different people. Ultimately, if you're in charge, you're going to make up a choice and a decision, and you got to go for it and stick to it and rally people behind you, because you cannot be waffling. I mean, if you waffle, you're finished. So. And at the end of the day, you have to say, okay, it works or it doesn't work, but I'm going to give it my best shot, And that's what we did with the Pfizer case.
Let me now shift gears, Pascal, and talk about another defining moment, I think, for your leadership and AstraZeneca, which all of our listeners can relate to, of course, including myself, COVID-19. When COVID-19 came, obviously, that was the ultimate, in a way, one of the ultimate leadership tests. And AstraZeneca, for our listeners, they may recall, you moved at a lightning speed to develop a vaccine in under a year, something that normally takes a decade in the old days. How did you lead your organization to accomplish this scientific marathon and sprint at a record pace and in a very stressful time as well?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually, Jean-Philippe. Can I go back to the Pfizer story and say one last thing, maybe quickly? Because I think it's also, again, it talks about, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. When Pfizer approached us originally, the British government was in favor of the proposal because they had sort of been told and believed that the headquarters were going to be in the UK, so they saw that's a good deal. But rapidly, and that was also helpful because of our focus on science, but rapidly the scientific community rallied behind us, actually. And we ended up, created, of course, a political discussion, debate, and we ended up having Pfizer and us to testify in front of Parliament. We had a Parliament inquiry.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
You remember that? Yeah. And, I was shaking when I was going there because I was thinking the little guy from the northern part of France who grew up in a low-cost housing suburb going to Parliament in London. But in the end, we could have said, no, we don't want to participate. But I thought we have to go because we have to tell our story to everybody.
Yeah.
And it worked again. But I went there with two scientists, a woman and a man who accompanied me. And I'm sure I still remember that story being in Parliament. And we, of course, were questioned. But I think it's another example of you got to push yourself.
Yes.
And then, take your chances, really. Going back to your question now about COVID,
Yep.
Throughout all of this, I think all of this Pfizer story and then, the turnaround, the journey we went through. First of all, I think we had a very strong board, very cohesive board, and that's important, right? Because when you make a difficult, or challenging decision, you take a risk, let's say, you have to have cohesion in the board.
Absolutely.
Number one. Number two, we had a management team, leadership team that was also very cohesive. And number three, I think certainly I had, and many people on my team had developed a sort of a emotional connection to the UK. So we wanted to help. So before going into COVID vaccine, we actually built, with the University of Cambridge, a testing center in Cambridge. Because you remember initially there was not enough testing. Everybody needed to be tested.
Right. Yeah.
There was not enough testing center. So it was like this huge effort through the UK, a little bit like during the Second World War when they had this flotilla of boats going to France to take all the army and bring them back to the UK, right? So you had small centers, big centers doing testing throughout the UK, and everybody was working together. It was an incredible time. And then, of course, in parallel to this, we worked on the vaccine. We did it at the time, and I know some people don't believe it, but we simply did it because we wanted to help. And we helped initially with masks in January of that year. We then looked at our medicines. Is there anything we can repurpose? We developed an antibody for COVID treatment, COVID prevention for people who don't respond to vaccine. And then we started working on the vaccine with Oxford.
Yep.
And quite frankly, I think even though we were criticized at the time a little bit here and there for not being able to supply everything in Europe in particular, if you look at the emerging markets, it was a resounding success.
Had a huge contribution here. You should share some numbers. I think it was
actually, we
incredible.
delivered 3 billion doses of vaccine.
3 billion doses. Wow.
And it was estimated independently from us that this vaccine saved 6 million lives. 90% of people in India were vaccinated with our vaccine that we developed in partnership with Serum Institute of India. Yeah. In many countries, Brazil, etc., 60% of people got our vaccine. In Vietnam, Thailand, all these places, so Latin America, South Asia, all these places, they really relied on our vaccine because at the time there was no vaccine except the Chinese vaccines.
Yeah.
Because the US was keeping what they had for themselves, which you can understand. There was not enough for the US population, and Europe was keeping everything for themselves too because there was not enough for Europe. And so they started exporting or sharing, if you want. But later on, they shared when they had enough for themselves.
Of course.
Which was several months later. But think about a country that has access to no vaccine. Every day counts for the population, but also for government, because the population tells the government, what are you doing? I mean, look at France, the US, they're all vaccinating, and we have nothing here. So, it helped the populations, and it helped everybody actually throughout. And, I can see even today, 5 years later, many countries in this so-called emerging markets, many countries are still thankful for what we did. Yeah,
of course. I mean, I'm sure you left clearly infinite kind of positive mark in those countries in terms of global access to medicine and what it means actually.
Also because we sold the vaccine at cost.
Exactly. That's exactly.
These countries, of course, they're not as rich as the US or Europe. We made no profit. Yeah. So the price was much lower, and then they could buy it.
So, Pascal, this is an amazing moment. What is the biggest leadership lesson you took out of that moment with your team, and
The biggest what? Sorry?
leadership lesson, right? You took
The value of a great team.
the
Because
team.
it's quite interesting at the time. I mean, my team and the board actually, but my team in particular could have said, "What are you doing? I mean, why are we doing this? I mean, we
Yeah.
have so many other things to do. It's going to be a distraction." In fact, some investors, some shareholders told us, "You're going to be distracted. It's going to be a big distraction. Why are you doing it?"
Yeah.
And there's not a single person on my team, not a single person who told me we should not do this. Everybody said, "Let's do it." And honestly, often I think about it, I even have some emotional moments about it because of the fact that everybody said, "Let's go, let's do it." And again, it was not perfect. We gave it our best shot. We made a big difference in many parts of the world, not everywhere. But it was really, I mean, the learning was having a team that rallies, because it's hard to describe. I mean, the amount of work that had to be done, because we had to set up regional supply chains, because we suspected, and we were proven right from day one, that countries would not share and they would capture whatever you manufacture in their country, they would capture it for themselves. And in fact, it happened with India. We had an agreement that 50% of the supply would stay in India, 50% would be exported. And in the end, COVID exploded in India, and they said, "No, sorry, we keep everything.
We keep it for ourselves."
So we sort of had a big problem, but thank God we had regional supply chain in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in different places, so we could continue to supply.
That's a wonderful story, Pascal. No, I'd like us to slow down a little bit, because for our listeners, we've been having a wonderful discussion about pharma for sure, and the cycles and the value chain. I'd like you to give us a 2 minutes, it's a challenge, masterclass on how does a medicine go from discovery to patient delivery? And what are the true gates where value is created or lost? In 2 minutes, Pascal, that's your challenge.
Well, good system. So there is a discovery step, what we call a preclinical step, which is lab, in vitro, and also in vivo in animals. So that's a preclinical step. Then you have the clinical step, and in the clinical steps there are three. You have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Phase 1, you establish that the drug has some signal of efficacy, but importantly is safe, and you do this in a controlled environment in volunteers. Phase 2 is you establish the efficacy and the dose that you need to take into phase 3. And of course, you do it in a bigger number of patients because the drug is safe enough. But the number is still not large enough to establish efficacy fully. And then phase 3 is made of very large studies where you recruit lots of patients and you have the statistical power to prove your hypothesis is true or not true. And then you go to the regulator with this data. So those are the steps, and the discovery step, of course, is important. That's where you look for new targets and you invent new molecules or new proteins or antibodies or antibody-drug conjugates. The preclinical step is probably more an execution step as opposed to a creative step. But it's an important one, of course, to establish safety, but also it's an important one in terms of speed. You have to move very quickly there because speed is important, of course. And then the clinical steps, each of them are important, of course. And then the cost, and that's the important piece. The cost goes up and up and up and up as you progress.
Builds up,
The cost of discovery is not that much. I mean, it's a lot of money, of course, but it's not that much in the great scheme of things. Preclinical, not so much. Phase 1, small number of patients. Controlled environment, so more expensive per patient, but small number. But when you get to phase 3, that's where you start spending a lot of money. We have a month. Sorry, I'll stop here. Maybe.
No, I think just give us a time frame of this whole cycle. How many years does it take overall, as an average? Because I know it can vary, but as an average today,
probably 10 plus years. Yeah.
Right. That's what I wanted our listeners to understand.
And the phase 3, and the phase 3 can go from, depending on the products, right? Because some products you can establish efficacy very quickly with only a 2-year study in phase 3, like an antibiotic or a blood pressure product. But some products you have to have 5 years, like oncology. You have to show you save lives. It takes 5 years. Or if you want to show you have an impact on heart attacks or kidney disease, it takes 4 or 5 years. So the phase 3 can be up to 5, 6 years. And the cost is high. We have a monthly, what we call portfolio review committee, which I chair. We meet twice, not monthly, we meet twice a month. I never approve less than 500 million of spend at each of these meetings. The other day I approved 2 studies for one product, 2 studies, $1 billion.
Wow. And
if those 2 studies fail, it's $1 billion in the garbage can for Americans or rubbish bin for the British. But, you know, we bet big money in our industry, and that's what people have to understand. It's the risk is huge.
No, that's a wonderful summary. I think my biggest learning was at the board, it's an amazing industry in terms of the long-term 10 years bet you guys have to make. 10 years. And while you also have to report on your numbers every quarter, of course. And so that contrast to me was like, wow, okay, that's a very different industry in many ways than many others. I've appreciated a lot the work you have to do as a leader to balance that, because you also need to deliver on your commitments every quarter to investors, shareholders, But at the end of the day, if you lose your compass and the bets you're making, well, guess what? You'll be done probably in a few years.
Absolutely, and it's an important piece. You know, often people look at us as companies and they say, "Well, you guys make a lot of money." But to me, it's like looking at Nicole Kidman or some very successful actor and saying Nicole Kidman is very rich. Well, she's rich because she's been successful. But you have also a lot of actors who live in an underground apartment in Los Angeles and work at a restaurant every night because they can't make enough money being an actor. And the equivalent in our industry is you've got a few companies that do well, but you also have a lot of companies that decline. Now, in our industry, companies don't exactly go bankrupt because they decline and they get bought. That's the equivalent of bankruptcy. We came close ourselves to this, but if you go back, the number of companies that have disappeared from our industry over the last 20, 30 years is very, very large. They were all bought.
It is. No. Pascal, we still have a few more minutes to go, and I want to go into a few more questions. So the next one is, if you apply that masterclass to, I think, one area which clearly is a huge priority for AstraZeneca and the industry, oncology. When you look at the next 5 to 10 years, what are you the most excited about in terms of oncology science? I think it'd be great for our listeners to understand that.
Yes, and I think maybe I need to start with giving people a sort of a historical perspective. To better understand why this moment in time is so exciting. Is when I started in the industry, we were selling pills and some injectable products. And essentially, the treatment of cancer was made of injectable or oral, to be honest, chemotherapies that had limited efficacy and, of course, a lot of side effects, as we all know. And I started in a company that was mostly involved in antibiotics and cardiology, hypertension, these kind of things. But then in the late 90s, I started being involved or associated with cancer. And I have been to the ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology in the US. That's the biggest cancer congress. The European one is ramping up, but ASCO is still the biggest. I've been going to the ASCO every year for the last 25 or 26 years. And I still remember late 90s, early 2000, the physicians were people were presenting their results, because the ASCO is about, doctors coming and presenting their study results. And it was always about a little bit of this chemo with that other chemo, combined differently, change the regimen, the dose, etc., and you gain 1 month of progression-free survival. Sometimes a little bit of overall survival, survival. And that was the progress at the time. And then in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, the first antibody was introduced, Herceptin, for a very severe form of breast cancer, so-called HER2-positive breast cancer. But we stayed with a few products like this one and a couple of others until maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago. In the last 8, 9 years, there's been an explosion of science. Immuno antibody, immuno products, antibodies, and now they are bispecific antibodies. We have antibody drug conjugates. We have cell therapy. We have T-cell engagers. We have a whole series of technologies, new, of course, small molecules that are a lot more targeted. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is we have tools to much better target patients and know which patients is more likely to respond to what treatment. And then you can combine those technologies. So a bit of a long introduction to answer your question. The most exciting part is we are starting to cure some cancers. And I can see today mostly in hematology, blood cancers, but I can see the day is not that far where we will be able to cure cancers. Not all cancers, but some cancers. And over time, more and more cancers. And we will do this by combining treatments. Combining, for instance, IO, immuno-oncology products, with antibody drug conjugates, fragmenting, shrinking the tumor, and then bringing T-cell engagers or cell therapy and finishing the tumor and curing people, and delivering either cure or long-term sustainable remission. So it's incredibly exciting. It's complicated because you have to find what is the right product. But we now have all the technologies. We also have technologies to better diagnose patients earlier. And so if you diagnose cancer early, of course, you have a better chance to cure it.
Well, this is a very optimistic note. Yet there's tons of work, as you said, to happen to make it work. So now let's zooming out. The science is global, but the world is getting more and more fragmented, Pascal, as you know well, because you travel the world all the time. Industrial policies, supply chains, talent flows, pricing regimes, custom tariffs as well, regulatory. Or are geopolitics changing the operating model of a global pharma company today?
Yes. I have to say, first of all, I'm a big believer in collaboration. I mean, science is important, but there's not a single person in the world who wakes up in the morning and has the solution to all the problems in the world. Solutions come out of collaborative work. Collaboration between academia and private sector, but also, and within a country, but also collaboration between countries. And it's really important that we continue maintaining that collaboration across scientists across the world. China is starting to become a massive contributor to innovation in our industry. So Chinese scientists need to work with American scientists and European scientists and other scientists from everywhere. Having said that, you're right. I mean, the world is definitely fragmenting, and it's going to affect, I think, supply mostly in our industry. And I think it's also a learning of the consequence of COVID. Everybody saw that in time of crisis, nobody shares. They share when they have enough for themselves. And you cannot blame people, because if you're an elected leader, politician, you're elected to take care of your own people first.
Of course, your community.
That's what happens, right?
Yes.
And so it's just a reality. You might say it's sad, it's bad, or whatever, but I think it's just reality.
It's a fact now.
It's a fact. You can't blame people. So everybody's realized that you have to have your own sovereignty in many sectors, and in particular in pharmaceuticals. So we have been doing this for many years, but we're doing even more. Manufacturing footprint in the US and China, so those geographies can operate independently from each other.
Yeah, I remember seeing you on a video is Mr. Trump in the US announcing some of your investment there as well. Now, talking about actually this global perspective, Pascal, in the December 18, 2025 interview, you warned that Europe's pharma industry could become a shadow of itself within 15 years if it doesn't change. What exactly is Europe, you think, getting wrong, and what would you urge European leaders to do differently in the next 24 months to come?
Yes, great question. I mean, again, going back to when I started in the industry, we were selling pills, and in the late 90s, early 2000s, antibodies and lots of technologies. But at the time, Europe was probably the main contributor to innovation in our industry. And the US was also a contributor, but I would argue Europe was probably the main contributor. And China, of course, was not participating in innovation at the time. And today, the main contributor of innovation is the US, and China is the other one, growing very quickly. And Europe has fallen behind in a big time. And so the question is why? And I think the answer is many politicians and governments see our industry as a cost.
Yeah.
And there are three dimensions to our industry, I think. One, of course, is helping patients live longer and better life. But that has a cost. That is the industry. Of course, our products have to be paid. I mean, they create a cost. The second dimension is the value creation, the jobs that we create, the R&D that we invest in, and the job we create are good jobs. They create themselves additional jobs. So we look at it in the UK. One job at AZ creates 6 jobs outside, suppliers, and the community at large. And the third dimension is health sovereignty.
Yes.
If you lose your sovereignty over the supply of medicines, then basically you have a problem one day. And I think what will happen is, unfortunately, is that Europe has a large manufacturing base, but for the older technologies, the new technologies, new plants will tend to be built in the US because of the Trump administration is incentivizing everybody to do so. And so if you fast forward 15 years, it is quite possible Europe will source its generics from India and China, which is the case today, and its innovative products from the US and China.
From the US.
Wow. It will have lost its health sovereignty. It will have lost the value creation of our industry. And why is that? It's simply because they focus on cost. And try to minimize the cost of our products as opposed to having a broader picture in mind. Okay, what does the industry cost me? What does it bring me? Of course,
and the value of that for the
better health for my people, but also reduce hospital costs, reduce heart attacks, which are costly, kidney disease, reduce all the costs associated with those. But they only look at the cost of the drugs in the bucket, not the rest.
Not the added cost. We only have a few minutes left to respect your time commitment, Pascal. So I had so many other questions to ask you, but I'm going to make a choice. So please, if you can be fast in your response. One is about AI. There's so much going on in AI in the world, as you know, and within your industry. I was reading an Economist article saying that overall probability of success, again, will go up from 5-10% to 9-18% again in terms of phase 1 success with AI origin molecules. So there's also new startups like the one created by Reid Hoffman and Siddhartha Mukherjee called Manas AI to apply AI to discovery for cancer, again, oncology. Where do you see AI bringing the most value into the pharma business and into AstraZeneca today? What do you do with AI, Pascal?
I think AI is transforming completely our industry and our company in ways that are more traditional, regular, like, administrative process, also manufacturing, robotics and AI. And also the commercial aspects, how we commercialize our products. But if I look at the R&D process, which is what you're talking about, I mean, I'm not sure, to be honest, how they calculate 19% because I don't know either. There's not enough data yet to do this.
I'm sure.
But what we can say for sure, it will improve probability of success. Now, some people say it will reduce number of jobs. I think it will increase the number of medicines that are discovered and made available. If you're successful doing this, you don't have to reduce your headcount. You just maybe have to recruit different people. And so it is changing the way we do discovery. It's helping us find new targets, new mechanisms of action. And then it's also helping us in a clinical process. Now, people oversimplify. They say AI, but it's more complicated than this.
Of course.
You have to have the data. And very often the problem is a single company doesn't have enough data to apply AI constructively on the clinical
Clinical
front.
phase. Yeah.
So one of the things we've done is we have done a partnership with a company called Tempus that is based in Chicago in the US.
Yep.
And we've done a joint venture called PASS, that is basically looking at how do you apply AI to a whole large database of data. So Tempus has access to anonymized data from maybe 80% of cancer patients around the US.
Yep.
And then they have the clinical data, they have the pathology data, and they have all sorts of other data, metabolomics and transcriptomics data. And then you bring all of this together and you apply AI. And we've developed algorithms that we've just finished, multimodal model, AI model, that we believe will help us predict the probability of success of a trial. Also identify which patients have a better chance to respond. And so better design our clinical trials and improve the success rate of our clinical trials. I'm absolutely convinced it will be the case. But having AI tool is not sufficient. You have to have the data. Then you have to have the technology to do diagnostic test, look at the pathology samples you've got, etc., and bring all of this together.
Okay, so a lot of opportunities. My last question, because we are just on time to finish. I need to ask you last question, which we discussed a bit together. What does positive leadership mean to you personally, Pascal? And if you had one single piece of advice to give to all of our listeners who want to lead positively in a world that can feel both exciting and unstable, what would that piece of advice be for them? So positive leadership, philosophy for you, and one piece of advice.
I think positive leadership, the way I understand it, is really to create a positive picture, to create a vision, a goal, and supported by a plan, of course, that people can get excited about, people can look forward to. And that's number one. Number two is making sure everybody understands what their contribution to this common goal is. And number three, to create an environment where, because of the values, the culture you create, etc., people enjoy working. They enjoy working. Of course, they have to be paid the right amount, but that's, table stake. But people come to work because they think they're going to make a difference about something. It could be anything. In our industry, it's making drugs. But they have to understand what is the goal, what is the shared purpose, what is the plan to get to that goal, what is their contribution, and also they have what they need to work toward that goal. They work in a company with the right culture, the right values, and they are, able to grow and become a better person. I mean, my career has been about moving around the world, meeting with a whole range of people, when in fact, until I was 19, I had not left France. And I grew up with people who, in a part of France where people looked like me. They all looked like me.
Yes.
They were all look like me. I mean, this was like a long time ago, of course. And then I started working with people who were different from me. Not only looking different, but also thinking differently. And I learned to appreciate that diversity and the value of diversity and the value of bringing people together for a common goal.
What a wonderful way to end our podcast conversation, Pascal. It's been a wonderful moment, a joy, truly, to reconnect together, first of all, because we had spent many hours together in the past, and to learn a few journeys from your suburb in France to the global world, and truly see your passion of bringing science to the patients everywhere in the world. So thank you so much, Pascal. For listeners, please share your ratings and your feedbacks on this episode. Take care and stay tuned, because we'll have some other exciting episodes to come. Pascal, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. Merci.